Two. So we need to do a little bit of review for your test over Sense and Sensibility. And I thought that one really useful piece of information would be to look at some of the different places in the novel. So I want you to take a minute and try to figure out, see if you can remember or figure out with your neighbors who lives in each of the places listed here. So go ahead and pause the video and take a minute to see if you can figure it out. Okay, do you think you have it? Do you think you got it? Let's see. Here are the answers. Combe Magna is the residence of Mr. Willoughby. Delaford is Colonel Brandon's property. Norland Estate was originally inhabited by the Dashwood family, and of course, John and Fanny come and more or less kick them out pretty early in the novel. Barton Estate is what that's supposed to say, not Barton Estage, but sorry for the typo. Barton Estate is Sir John and Lady Middleton. Of course, Barton Cottage, there on their property, is inhabited by the Dashwoods after leaving Norland. Allenham Court is technically owned by Mrs. Smith, which is Mr. Willoughby's aunt, who is then going to will it to him. And Cleveland, who thought that we would be reading about Cleveland in a Jane Austen novel, is owned by the Palmers. Okay, so those are the properties of note. Now, the format for your test. This is a pretty big test. It's a full-on 100-point test. You will have character identification questions, pretty similar to what you saw in your quizzes. It will include major characters and minor characters, and that review of places that we just did will help because some of those are in the descriptions. You're going to have about 10 multiple choice questions, fairly plot-based, but you do need to review the 2 PowerPoints that we've done in class. There was one at the very beginning of the unit, and then the one in the video before this. General information about the time period, the role of women, the Regency era, why it's called that, things like free and direct discourse, satire and irony, all fair game in that multiple choice section. Then there's a passage analysis where I reproduce a passage from the novel on the test and ask you fairly specific questions in an AP style format about that part of the book. So you need to be prepared to use literary terms and rhetorical terms in context, and you need to be prepared to explain the language in that excerpt from the book. Finally, you have an essay question, which is worth a big honkin' 30 points. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that essay question here. We need to go into OneNote. And if you guys will look under reference documents, I am hoping that all of this is synced and live. I have added information on the AP English Literature and Composition exam. And you might be saying, hey, Mrs. Murphy, this isn't AP English Literature and Composition, this is AP English Language and Composition. Well, yes, that's the course that you're taking this year. It's very similar in terms of the style of writing that they want on the 2 exams are very similar. But the AP literature prompts are going to be more appropriate for analyzing a piece of literature. And the bottom line is that about 2/3 of you are taking this course next year. So my feeling was that to use a prompt from the AP English literature exam would help prepare you not only for the exam in my class at the end of this year, but also for the course that many of you will be taking next year. So I've provided you here with a link to that exam page. We've looked at the exam page for language and composition before, and this is very similar. This is on the College Board website through AP Central, and you have a description of their exam. The exam for that course, very similar in that it starts with a multiple choice section. It's just that the readings are fiction instead of nonfiction. We're not really worried about that right now. We're looking at the free response section. So on the literature test, instead, there's no synthesis question, nothing like it. You basically have two analysis questions. One is analysis of a poem and one is analysis of prose fiction. So again, the exam you're taking this year has analysis of nonfiction. The exam that many of you will take next year has analysis of fiction. That's really the main difference, but the format for those questions is basically the same. Then question number 3 is what they call the open response question. And this is where they take a look at a specific concept, issue, or element of a work of literature. And they will actually tell you just to choose a novel or play of literary merit. And I'm sure Ms. Kerwin will talk to you more about what literary merit means next year. But basically, they want you to take a work that you have probably studied in school or read for independent reading and apply it to this question. So it's the question number 3s that I'm working from for your Sense and Sensibility prompt. We're going to look at the old question number 3s and figure out which of them could be applied well to Sense and Sensibility. So normally when you're taking the exam, you're sort of doing the opposite. You're looking at the question and then you're thinking about all the things you've read and trying to think which novel or play that I've read will fit this question. Today we're going to be doing the opposite. You're going to be thinking about this book and then looking at all these different prompts and saying, okay, which prompt would fit this book? So you're just doing it in reverse. So what I've done here is on OneNote, you will also find a list of the question 3 prompts for AP Literature from 1970 to 2016. So here is this big old honkin' list of all of these different AP Literature prompts. I want you to read over them, paying special attention to the more recent ones. Maybe even start backwards. Don't really worry about those missing prompts at the end. Maybe start with 2016 and sort of work your way backwards. And I want you to discuss here in a little bit, I want you to discuss in your small groups which of these would you want to see on your exam. And I actually want for you in your small groups to decide on 3 that you think you could write about Sense and Sensibility using those 3 prompts, and then decide which of those 3 you would most want me to put on your test and explain why. And then one person in your group needs to email me that information. Go ahead and send it in an email. That way I'm going to be forced to look at it before I print out your tests this afternoon. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so there's that. Now, how will your essay be graded? Well, I've given you a rubric for the AP score calibrated to a 30-point scale. And I realize you guys have never written a literature essay before. However, the format really is similar to what you've practiced since freshman year. It's good writing. You make a claim, you give some evidence to back it up, and then you expand and explain with warrant or commentary. So it really is that simple. But to help you guys out, up here under AP English Literature and Composition, I have given you guys a list of some sample essays that you might want to read. So if you go back to the website and you continue to scroll, you will see old free response questions. And you can click on them. Click on Q3. Don't worry about Q1 or Q2. We're only concerned with Q3 here. And last year's prompt was about intentional deception, which certainly could be one topic that you might apply to Sense and Sensibility. They first give you a very specific rubric for scoring, and then they give you the sample essays. Now, I think the sample essays are a lot more meaningful when you've scored. And you know what? I really don't expect you to be writing eights and nines on an AP scale, but I also don't expect to be giving a whole lot of 100% on a 100-point test either. That's really, that's an A++. So, if you can hit that range of writing about a 6, we've been saying all along on these AP tests, if you can just write 6s, you can still do really well. And the same is going to be true for this test. So if you guys would take some time to work in your small groups, go over the prompts first, and then with whatever time you have, read some sample essays from the College Board website and try to figure out, what really is the difference between a 5 essay, which is overly general, and may or may not be recommended for college credit, versus a 7 essay, which is really what I want you to be aiming for. And how does that parse out? So you're going to take the remainder of your class time to work in small groups. Don't forget to send me that email with 3 prompts that your group thinks that you would be able to write about Sense and Sensibility based on these prompts. And then of those 3, which one would you most want to see on your test and why? Thanks a lot.